Throughout his career, Steve Martin has maintained his reputation as a man who can make everyone laugh. The serious side of his life, though, has long been a mystery to his adoring public. What was actually going on behind the scenes, untouched by the limelight, remained a mystery for years. Steve Martin's relatives have broken their silence after months of speculation to confirm what everyone had thought. Their disclosure does double duty. It clarifies things and gives fans a sweet glimpse into the personal life of a man who is beloved by millions. Come with us, for their findings challenge our entire worldview. They were all misled by the painting. Famous comedian Steve Martin, who is known for his brilliance and wit, became entangled in a turbulent story that was more intense than any of his comedic plays. His involvement in Germany's biggest art fraud scandal was not an acting role, but rather the result of a real twist in the plot. The complete collection of the devoted collector of Aboriginal art, comedian Steve Martin. He has almost 50 of these. This whole incident revolved around a picture that Martin used to take great pride in owning. He thought it was an extremely rare piece by the German-Dutch modernist Heinrich Campenden. In 2004, Martin bought the artwork Landscape with Horses from a respectable Parisian gallery, completely unaware of the painting's misleading character. But what seemed like a priceless treasure turned out to be a complex imitation. A huge operation was associated with Martin's role in the incident. German authorities have found evidence that the gang behind the forgeries had amassed about $48 million in profit over the last 20 years. There were still 33 more paintings that needed to be verified, even though 13 had already been found to be fakes. Experts and longtime collectors alike were taken aback by the fraud's scope, which exposed their vulnerability to deceit. Many suspected that Wolfgang Beltrai, a man renowned for his talent in imitating the works of renowned modern artists, was the plotter in charge. Along with his wife Helen, her sister Jeanette, and an accomplice called Otto Schulter-Kellinghaus, he attempted to imitate the works of famous painters such as Heinrich Campenden, Fernand Léger, and Max Ernst. The forgeries were supported by complex deceit and were not only artistic touches. To make their work seem more real, the group made up elaborate backstories, fake documents, and made-up provinces. Art galleries, dealers, and even specialists were fooled by their complex schemes. Steve Martin was among the people they intended to harm. He made films and assembled personal artifacts that revealed his lifelong devotion to the arts. He took every care to be a responsible collector after purchasing Landscape with Horses for $850,000. An authority on Campendonk confirmed the authenticity of the artwork before its purchase from a respectable gallery. No room for uncertainty existed. The painting was valuable to Martin not just as an investment, but also as an aesthetically pleasing piece of art to display and enjoy. He did not intend to make a profit when he sold the artwork to a Swiss businesswoman in 2006, 2 years later, at a loss of $500,000. After the picture had gone unseen by everyone at Christie's auction house, the truth was only exposed at a later date. It was formerly thought that Campenden had created the painting, but in reality, the brilliant forger Belracci was responsible. The revelation had a profound effect on Martin. Unfortunately, he was deceived despite the fact that he had followed all the necessary steps to ensure his safety as a collector and was not accused of any wrongdoing. The gallery had promised to cover any costs he would incur from compensating the buyer. However, the monetary and legal issues remained. The forger's astounding cleverness was what struck Martin the most. They made up full backstories in addition to making up artworks. The forgers claimed that the artworks were part of hidden collections that had been amassed during the Nazi regime, something passed down through generations of troubled times, cherished family heirlooms. They built a system of trust that nobody dared to doubt by mixing real and false artworks. It was not just Martin who went through this. It was a common plight for galleries and collectors everywhere. Cazo Beraudier and other French galleries unwittingly displayed and sold fake artwork as well. The inability to distinguish between real and phony art forced even seasoned experts to confess their error. The art world's reliance on the credibility and opinion of specialists was exposed by the controversy. More than just money was lost for Martin. It made him realize that aesthetics may be deceiving, and that art can include both truth and dishonesty. Even after it was revealed as a fake, The painting that had captivated him with its emotion and beauty continued to look good. But the original artist's spirit was lost in the process. Absent of the authenticity that makes art, it became a portrayal of excellence that was only hollow. The forgery controversy served as a sobering reminder that even the most conscientious collectors are susceptible to skilled deception. Martin got sucked in because he trusted the advice of others around him, not because he was greedy or careless. The betrayal he experienced had an emotional consequence that extended beyond monetary loss. Steve Martin's name became synonymous with the scandal in the end, although not because he committed a crime, but because he was a famous man who was swept up in it. Not even reputation and brilliance could protect him from being tricked, as the attention he received proved. His relatives had other secrets as well. Accompany us. You have only scratched the surface. A private struggle for Steve Martin's well-being. The world has always known how to laugh at Steve Martin, the famous comedian. On rare occasions, though, his amusement masks a hint of concern. He took his supporters by surprise the day before his 80th birthday, when he posted a selfie of himself with a CT scan machine. The image made some people concerned about his well-being, even though he usually has a humorous personality. Even though he didn't say why he was scanning, his loved ones were already worried after reading the message. Celebrating turning 80 is no small feat, but Steve chose to do it in his own humorous style. He told the audience that, unlike many others, he was unconcerned with his age throughout a performance. With a laugh, Steve revealed that the year he turned 77 was the most challenging one for him. Reason being his one-of-a-kind sense of humor, not his advanced years. Given my dyslexia, Steve has always been exceptional at seeing the funny side of things, bringing happiness to everyone he meets. Despite the comedic undertones, it is clear that aging brings its fair share of health problems. Among Steve's openly discussed challenges is his tinnitus, a condition that causes a constant ringing in the ears. With time and some adaptations to his daily routine, he has learned to live with this disease and pursue his talents for performance, acting, and writing. The probability of him experiencing further health problems increases as he approaches his 80s. A number of his admirers have begun to wonder if he is suffering from sleep disorders after he casually brought up the idea of utilizing a sleep apnea equipment. In the Instagram post, people's love and care for him shone through. The comment section was quickly inundated with messages of love, encouragement, and optimism. The tremendous response Steve got showed the deep bond he has with his listeners, even if he refrained from divulging any further details. For his devoted followers, he is more than just a famous person. He is a father figure who has been there for so long that he feels like a part of their family. An ulterior motive lies beneath Steve Martin's laughter, motivated more by his father's disapproval than by the adulation of his admirers. Martin has spoken about the difficulties of growing up in a home without love and full of continual criticism. Despite his fame as an actor, writer, and comedian, known for films including The Jerk and Father of the Bride, perhaps his father, Glenn Martin's incapacity to understand or support his son's unconventional choices stemmed from his own ambitions to become an actor, which he ultimately abandoned for a more traditional job. Steve felt the anguish of rejection from a young age on. His sister, Melinda Dobbs, recalled that their father lacked affection and instead acted out of wrath and condemnation when kindness was absent. Outside of his house, Steve sought solace in his friends, music, and, most importantly, his creative imagination, the latter of which would shape his professional life. In spite of this, Steve had a hard time finding love in his boyhood home. His father's comments became increasingly harsh as he got older and started performing stand-up comedy. Even though Steve's comedy was adored by people all around the globe, Glenn remained unimpressed. Even after he became famous and successful in the movies and theaters, Glenn couldn't stop making negative comparisons to historical individuals. Steve will never be able to compete with Charlie Chaplin, in Glenn's opinion. The father, Glenn, never felt proud of his son's achievements because his remarks made it clear that he could never be satisfied. Steve admitted that he did several things just to make his father happy. With each performance, joke, and achievement, he wished he might finally bring his father pride. However, such confirmation was infrequent. Steve responded positively to his father's displeasure, turning it into a source of inspiration. He discovered strength in his father's rejection, which he turned into an odd type of support. In spite of his feelings of estrangement and hurt, Steve persevered and built a brilliant profession, which his father overlooked. Testimonies from friends and acquaintances enriched the comprehension much more. One time, guitarist John McQuan described how Glenn scolded Steve in the dressing room after a performance. These incidents were devastating, and they happened at a time when Steve was having a lot of success. But Glenn's disapproving streak went back much farther. Steve remembered getting a stern reprimand for buying a pair of shorts for $4 when he was a kid, funds that he had independently acquired, instilling a sense of independence in himself at an early age. This occurrence drove him to swear off receiving anything from his parents from that day onward. As time went on, Steve's need for approval never wavered. The weight of his father's criticism hung heavy on him, even as he received public praise and laughter. Despite his successes, he still had times of loneliness brought on by his lingering sense of inadequacy. As an adult, his views on familial accomplishments and relationships were colored by the residual impacts of their troubled relationship. Wasp, a one-act play that Steve wrote in 1996, gave him a platform to express himself creatively, while also addressing his background. The father's role in the Glenn-based play demonstrated how Steve's past greatly influenced his creative pursuits. By writing the play, Steve hoped to channel his anguish into storytelling, finding comfort in the creative process while channeling his energy toward healing. Steve was able to repair his relationship with his father in their later years. Their emotional distance shrank as time went on. Forgiveness was crucial in healing the breach. Even when the wounds from previous criticism were still fresh, he found comfort in his marriage to Anne Stringfield and their daughter. But Steve has since said that his strained relationship with his father was a contributing factor to his sense of loneliness. By assuming the responsibilities of a husband and parent, Steve was able to rewrite his story and give his children the love and attention he had never experienced growing up. In what way did he come to love Anne so profoundly? Let's investigate. Embraced love in all its glory. Time is of the essence, according to Steve Martin. He was a master of stage timing, using pauses and turns to keep the audience in fits of laughter. But in his private life, his love affairs were frequently impromptu, short, and full of surprises. And yet, for a long time, he maintained a low profile when it came to his romantic relationships. His romantic ups and downs behind the scenes were as interesting as any film in which he appeared. The beginning of his trip was not a grandiose love story, but rather a humble act of kindness. Steve landed a writing gig for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour in 1967. Before he became famous, Nina Goldblatt, Steve's ex-girlfriend and a dancer on the show, recommended him to the head writer. He had been hoping for this chance encounter his whole life. A recurring motif in his life was the tight coupling of his romantic life with his professional life. Nina had unwittingly set him on a course that would define his entire life when she introduced him to the world of comedy. Eve Babette's, a writer and cultural personality, soon enchanted him. She became his love interest and had a profound effect on his career. She had the bright idea of dressing him in a crisp white suit, which would come to represent him as a comedian and be associated with his stage persona. More than just clothes, this suit represented a lot. It was a symbol of love-inspired self-expression, flair, and protection. The 1970s, Steve was allegedly involved with a number of famous women. Connections to Karen Carpenter, Maureen McCormick, and Linda Ronstadt, a singer, were the subject of much speculation. Despite the lack of evidence for many of these claims, these stories painted Steve as someone who had brief encounters with beautiful people. The fact that he secretly desired something real, something more than just celebrity, is indisputable. He became quite close to Bernadette Peters around 1977. They shared an original, tender, and genuine bond. The Jerk was a smashing success and a true reflection of their love for one another, because Steve created the persona for her. Their on-screen chemistry shone through because their off-screen relationship was just as strong. The enchantment, however, faded with time, as is the case with many Hollywood romance stories. Pennies from Heaven was their cinematic reunion, But the public didn't warm up to the band's new, harsher tone, and the picture bombed. By 1982, their relationship was ended, and with it came a mix of regret and admiration. Since then, Steve has been increasingly tight-lipped about his private life. Rumors surfaced at one point linking him to Tyler Moore, but they never materialized. But meeting British actress Victoria Tennant had an effect that lingered. They started dating shortly after co-starring in the 1984 comedy All of Me. They were married in 1986 and went on to spend many happy years together, during which they shared another acting role in LA Story. Steve later admitted that getting married was motivated more by a feeling of responsibility than true readiness, even if their relationship seemed perfect to onlookers. Their 1994 divorce was a sobering reminder that charm and shared laughter are insufficient ingredients for a lasting partnership. After Steve's divorce, his love life became much calmer. He had an affair with photographer Cindy Sherman in the late 90s. Their shared vision for art inspired him. Even though they broke up, the connection they had was strong enough that Steve added her artwork to his collection, so her impact would never truly fade away, no matter where life takes him. When the new millennium began, rumors about Steve's romantic life circulated more freely. He was said to have developed feelings for Kristen Davis and Helena Bonham Carter, with whom he had worked in Novocaine. Neither rumor, though, led to the committed relationship that Steve had hoped for. A loner in his own universe, the comic who made so many others happy remained so despite his fame and success. After her, Anne Stringfield came up. Unlike the lavish partnerships portrayed in Hollywood, their romance was modest. Anne was not famous for anything. She was not even a performer. Working as a fact-checker for The New Yorker was her clandestine occupation. Their first phone conversation occurred while Anne fact-checked one of Steve's comic works. They skipped the romantic evenings. They built a relationship based on dialogue, trust, and shared humor over the course of a year, without ever physically meeting. They had an indisputable bond when they finally met face-to-face. In 2007, they surprised their closest friends with a wedding masquerading as a party in Steve's Los Angeles apartment. It was an authentically joyful moment. Steve found love after years of looking. He finally found someone who treated him like a real person, not a star. Another fortunate sequence of circumstances pleasantly surprised Steve when he was 67 years old. He became a father for the first time in 2012, the year his daughter was born. Steve used to be quite career-oriented when he was younger, so starting a family later in life gave him a fresh start. His ability to be a good father may have diminished if he had started a family sooner, he said. With the wisdom that comes with maturity, he jumped headfirst into being a dad and cherished every second he had with his daughter. While Anne shied away from the limelight for the most part, she did make a few cameos in Steve's hit show. Anne looked so much like Tina Fey that even Tina made fun of the two of them, saying that Anne was like a younger, slimmer, wiser version of herself. But Anne's generosity, not her brains or attractiveness, was what Steve admired most about her. In his twilight years, she became a rock, a steadying influence who encouraged him and helped him achieve professional and personal success. As the video progressed, Steve reflected on his life's path, admitting that he had encountered obstacles before sudden joy. He is fulfilled in his love, marriage, and role as a parent to a wonderful child, despite having endured loneliness and achieved achievement early on. An unhurried Steve Martin excursion. The life of Steve Martin has been a glittering one, filled with fame, fortune, and comedy. He was a comic genius who captivated audiences for decades with his onstage antics and film roles. But under all the glitz and glamour, there was a guy fighting invisible wars within. Steve now speaks with a softness that befits his precious and tranquil state of self-contentment. He is in a peaceful era of his life. He uses the Hungarian word pentagou to describe the emotion. This statement perfectly captures his present mental condition. It means to be at peace. He is now completely at peace, free from the continual pressure to prove himself. His work now flows more freely as a result of his enhanced creative process brought about by his newfound serenity. At 78 years old, he still effortlessly pulls off masterful shows that connect with viewers and garner praise. It took time to reach this state of balance. It was the product of steady improvement, perseverance, and an in-depth comprehension of life's inherent unpredictability. Steve often thinks about how his life has developed differently from most people's. Steve has taken the inverse path than the norm, which is to start a family while still young and then pursue a profession. He poured his heart and soul into humor, movies, and writing during his formative years, never letting up in his relentless pursuit of excellence. Nonetheless, he has come to fully appreciate the joys of marriage, fatherhood, and the tranquil contentment of family life as he has matured. This turn of events is, in his opinion, a blessing. He no longer plans to end his working life exhausted. Instead, he relishes in the company of loved ones, laughing, and the familiarity of his own home. Unanticipated consequences of aging have been felt by him. Even little changes, like an improvement in his driving, have started to stand out to him. But his character has changed more significantly. His capacity for empathy, patience, and compassion has grown. This subtle change in him has also been noticed by his pals. They have noticed that all of his artistic creations, be they plays, movies, or comedic sketches, share an underlying sense of longing. There is a hint of sadness even in his funniest moments. His stories have a genuine and human quality because of this blend of feelings. The piece beautifully captures the mix of joy and sadness that is inherent to being human. Even as a young man, Steve admits that he felt profound melancholy. His frequent feelings of detachment from others were a result of the pressures of fame. Despite the adoration of the masses, he frequently found himself in solitude when the cameras stopped rolling. Even the smallest of tasks seemed insurmountable due to the obstacles his fame had erected. During this time, he struggled with his own personal demons of worry and melancholy. The surrounding quiet was anything but calming. On the contrary, it was icy and intimidating. As time passed, the crippling melancholy diminished. He learned a new way to live that didn't depend on other people's approval from his experiences in life. His periods of solitude were more fulfilling than any recognition he might have received from other people. He learned the value of cherishing one's loved ones and savoring each moment as it unfolded. Gratefulness for his present life has supplanted the sadness that before hung over his days. His unwavering conviction allowed him to persevere through all of these challenges. Stay a while. Passionate determination to achieve success. Reaching one's goals is no easy feat. Through a trip fraught with peril and uncertainty, Steve Martin discovered his dogged determination was unfaltering, even in the face of his eccentric sense of humor and unconventional methods. The journey from little writing jobs to becoming a beloved figure in American comedy illustrates the incredible impact of perseverance and commitment in realizing one's dreams. Steve had no idea where his comedic career would go when he first began experimenting with it. The entertainment industry was made fun of by his portrayal as an egotistical dweeb. As part of his performance, he used banjo music, bizarre props, silly glasses, and magic acts. At first, many spectators didn't understand his comedy. At the end of some performances, the audience was either silent or confused. But Steve never wavered in his goal, and that kept him going. His sights were always set on a career in entertainment, despite the fact that he studied philosophy in college. If he didn't become successful by the time he became 30 years old, he personally threatened to quit the industry. Because of this deadline he set for himself, he worked harder, took more risks, and kept going, even when people seemed uninterested. Steve felt both acceptance and rejection throughout his early years. While his unique technique won over a small audience at college appearances, larger venues like the Playboy Club or Las Vegas were not always receptive to his comedic timing. But he kept going, brushing off each failure as an opportunity for growth. Regardless matter the outcome, he saw each performance as a chance to get better. Opportunities began to present themselves, albeit gradually. Television executives were captivated by his presentation, which employed music, props, and surreal humor. The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, and others quickly featured him. His appearance on Carson's show in 1974 was a highlight of his career. Even Sammy Davis Jr., who was sitting in the crowd, got up to embrace him because of how clever and unique his performance was. Steve finally looked to have reached the tipping point he had been hoping for, as if his unique method was beginning to garner some renown. For him, doors started to open wider. Then Lorne Michaels invited him to host Saturday Night Live, where he became famous afterward. As a result of his appearances on SNL, The show gained nearly 1 million new viewers. As the series progressed, Steve's eccentric antics solidified his position as one of television's most interesting characters. He has a devoted following thanks to his unpredictable and innovative performances. But Steve did not do much in a short period of time. Even before he became renowned, Steve had been quietly working tirelessly. His then-girlfriend, dancer Nina Goldblatt, introduced him to Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour head writer Mason Williams in 1967. Initially, Williams paid Steve out of his own pocket because he was so amazed. The show was much improved by Steve's participation. Plus, he and the writing crew won an Emmy in 1969, when he was only 23 years old. Of some, this was a precursor of future success. Steve still wanted to be a performer, so he tried a few different approaches to hone his stage presence and delivery. Looking back on his first national performance, he admitted to feeling awkward and unprepared. Everything about him was fake. His stiff hairdo, his daring clothing, and his attitude. He stayed in a condition of depression for 7 days after that since he was so discouraged. But he made the most of his setbacks by learning from them and improving his game. Steve began to notice the fruits of his labor in the mid-1970s. He began making regular appearances on numerous hit television shows, including Saturday Night Live, The Tonight Show, The Gong Show, HBO specials, and The Muppet Show. As his stage presence and self-assurance increased with each performance, so did his fan base. Even those who thought they didn't get his humor before were enamored with him now. His eccentric brand of humor went viral and changed the face of comedy forever. Not long after that, he was performing to sold-out crowds around the country, whose unique style they adored. In your opinion, how good is Steve Martin? Feelings on the revelations made by his relatives? Leave a comment with your ideas. To get more interesting stories like this, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching.